Right. Yeah. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a caregiver from a distance? Well, today we're going to hear from someone who had that experience firsthand. You may recognize her from an earlier conversation that we had. Hi, I'm Dee, and welcome to the Caregiver's Place, a place to get information about how to handle some of your great caregiver concerns. And today we have Bettina. Bettina, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Valda. And how about you? It's always good to see you, my girlfriend.
Yes, it's always good to see you too, Bettina. Now, Bettina, I want to hear about your role as a long distance caregiver. Exactly what does that mean and what did you do?
I think being a long distance caregiver can be different things to different people. I think I was truly long distance because I'm in Florida and both of my parents were in California, which is a good 3,000 miles away. So basically, that was my definition of myself being a long distance caregiver. I live here, they live there.
Okay, so again, there's definitely that distance there. So tell me a little bit about why you and not someone else being in that major role.
Well, and I'm sure everybody's going to agree with this. There's always one in the family. There's the one person that other members of the family go to, the one person that assumes more responsibility, the one person that steps up and steps in when it's time to do that without excuse. And I think that's why me. And beyond that, I adored both of my parents, and I was going to make darn sure that they never felt alone, that they never felt scared, and that they knew that someone of their children had their back. And that person was me.
Oh, Bettina, that's a blessing. I think that every parent wants to feel like they've got someone there. So it sounds like, and again, I know we talked briefly about advocating and being there. So when you think about advocating on behalf of your parents from a distance, what did you have to do?
Well, before my parents got to the point where they really needed someone either living with them or being in full-time care, I made sure that I understood both of my parents' conditions, which primarily were lifestyle conditions like, vascular problems, cardiac problems. My father had a stroke. My father had a heart attack. He had a back surgery that was kind of failed. And so he had a lot of back pain. And my position of advocacy was to know each of their physicians. Fortunately, they had excellent health care. So I knew all of their physicians because they had about 3 or 4 or 5 physicians each to understand their conditions so that I could ask all of the right questions and make sure that the things that the physicians were proposing were right for my parents. And as you well know, Valda, sometimes doctors, they don't know your parents like you do. And they don't have the ability because of their situations, the way they see 1,500 patients a year or something like that, or a month. So you have to be on top of it. You have to take control of your medical. And my mom in particular, she just didn't want to deal with it. And she wasn't as forceful. And also, I'm sure you know too, that some physicians have this bias against older women, as well as bias against people of color, as that's huge right now in our medical system. So I really wanted to make sure that they had an advocate who could ask those questions and who could assist in making the decisions. And I made sure that all of the medical people that took care of my parents understood that I was part of the team.
Okay, so even though you weren't there, it sounds like you had a relationship with their doctors, the doctors knew you. So how did you, I guess, communicate or coordinate with their healthcare partners, the doctors from a
Well, every
distance?
time I was home, I made a point of going to different physicians' appointments with my parents so that they would know me. And they all eventually got to know me. As a matter of fact, they'd say, when my parents got into appointment, well, do you want to get your daughter on the phone? Because I would be at every single appointment on the phone. And I always knew where each of my parents were at any given time of the day. And it's really amazing what you can do with a phone, email, and a fax. Now, certainly, did I have boots on the ground? Yeah, my sister, who would take my parents back and forth, or we would use transport if necessary. But the main contact for the medical management was myself and my parents, and all the physicians and healthcare providers for my parents understood that. But they did know me. And let's face it, I flew home at probably every 3 or 4 months. And as they got, more in need, it was like every couple of months that I flew home. And my work is, I have a very flexible schedule, so I was able to do that. And I could work from there, with my computer. So that was very helpful, although I needed to be in Florida, which was, it was really hard.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that you lived in Florida, but you were actually traveling back and forth also. So sometimes you were actually there, with them. So the question is, what about when you weren't there with them? Your parents, were they able to live pretty much independently, or did they need in-home caregiving services? How did that work?
Well, for my dad, we had services come in and out for physical rehab and things like that. For his back or for assistance in walking, we had that. But he could care for himself. And he did have a woman living with him that assisted him, although kind of towards the end there, she got a little bit less reliable. And that was when my father was moved into a full-time care facility, which in California was called a board and care. And it was actually a beautiful single family home on a couple of acres with a pool. And they had 6 residents living there. So he got just amazing individual attention there, which is what he really needed.
Yeah.
And of course, we had the physical rehab, the speech, all the physicians, and not physicians, but care providers that would come in and out. And my mom was fine on her own until probably the last 4 or 5 months of her life. And then we moved my mother out of the house. And that was really hard because my mother did not want to move, as you can well understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I hear you saying too, Bettina, is that you definitely had to look at how to make it work as far as from a distance, and that communication. I know that communication means everything. Having the people that you can communicate with, whether it's by, phone, or I don't know, at that point where you're doing Zoom. I know Zoom in so many ways is new for us.
Yeah.
But what about some of that face-to-face time? How did that work?
Well, it's interesting because my mom and I would Zoom, and I would share my screen, and we would actually watch old TV programs together. And we would go on YouTube, and we would watch all the old guys that my mom and I both loved. Fred Astaire dancing, the old Johnny Carson shows, the old Dean Martin and Carol Burnett shows. My mom and I would watch those, and we'd have so much fun just chatting and watching. So it's amazing, though, the amount of time, even traveling back and forth. When I was actually at home in California, I saw my parents more than my other 4 siblings who lived within an hour of my mom and dad,
Yeah.
which was, it hurt. It really hurt me.
And that's the thing that I hear so many people talk about, the challenges of getting people, and sometimes family, that's willing to, to step up. So again, we're talking about the support. So basically, where did your support come from? Because again, you're there, but at the same time, you're not there. So how did you have that support there for your family as far as when you weren't there?
Well, my personal support, it comes from friends. My sister and I are very, very close. But I also have a girlfriend here, Judy. As a matter of fact, if everyone looks at the other interview you did where there were 6 of us about caregiving, Judy's actually in that video. And she lived down the street from me and still does. We've been friends for over 17 years. And at the time, she was a full-time caregiver with her mother who lived with her. And she had basically kind of blazed the trail for me because she had been through a lot of the situations for medical that I was about to go through. So I could really rely on her for support and encouragement, especially Medicare issues. I mean, there's so many little tips and tricks that you can utilize for Medicare to make sure that your parents get the best health care and that they're not released too soon from the hospital, things like that. So Judy taught me a lot of tips and tricks. I had cousins that I spoke to, and sometimes when you're, because there's a lot of stress involved in that. I think
Mhm.
there can be maybe even more stress when you're so far away.
Yeah.
But I've talked to both of my parents almost every single day on the phone.
Okay.
So that support came from cousins, my best girlfriend, and my mom and dad themselves. I could always talk to my mom and dad about anything. So we would talk and we would strategize about their care. And sometimes we had difficult conversations, but my philosophy was I would tell my mom and dad, look, we are going to have difficult conversations. That's a given.
Mhm.
But I will always love you. I will always respect you. And I know you will always love me. So that will never be a question in our lives.
Yeah.
And I will never leave you.
Yeah. You
So
know what?
that's,
As you talk, all I can say is that the love comes through, and again, that caring. And I know that when you talk about like the resources and finding those people that's able to give you something from there. And again, being able to get, I guess, one resource here, get a little something here, get a little something from here, and looking at how it all comes together so that you're getting what you need in order to be able to be the best caregiver you can possibly be. And then having that ongoing communication, contact with your parents. So it sounds like even though you were a distance away, the fact that you were in contact with them every day definitely made them feel like, hey, she is really here for us. And that means everything, the resources and knowing that you're there. So I think that what you talked about is how caregiving from a distance, you might have been just as much of a caregiver as someone who is right there in the state, in that same city, than maybe somebody else. So thank you for sharing your story as far as how to make it work. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to make?
well, in fairness, what I'd like to say is, I am not perfect. And there are times when I think, well, maybe should I have just uprooted myself and my business and moved back home to California? There are times when I'd call friends or cousins and just whine about everything and just vent. But I think knowing that my parents were pleased with me and that they were proud of me, even though I have always continuing self-doubts, I feel like I don't have any regrets. And to love your parents, it is an honor to be able to love and care for your parents that have cared for you. And I think we should all think about that and plan for that future if possible. I know not everybody can afford to be flying across country or take off from their jobs. But as I said, there's a lot you can do on the phone and with boots on the ground. Like thank God I have my sister,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing for sure, you were a caregiver and you were there, even from a distance. So again, thank you, because I'm sure that there's people probably watching and thinking, how can I make it work? I want to be there for them, but
Right,
I'm not able to physically leave where I am to be there. So
right.
the tips that you've given and the conversation that we've had today, I think is really encouraging and really an inspiration probably for so many other people who are trying to figure it out. So thank you, because it's not about being perfect, but it's definitely about looking at how to make it work.
That's awesome. Thank you, Valda.
And thank you, Bettina.
Bye, everybody.